Good morning, everyone, and welcome back to Morning Musings. My name is Don K. Preston. I am the president of Preterist Research Institute of Ardmore, Oklahoma. Hope you'll go to my website, donkpreston.com, bibleprophecy.com, or eschatology.org, pardon me, and check out a ton of articles, all free for the reading, all right? If you wish to take advantage of some very special book offers that I'm making, banners are there. And speaking of special offers, for my Now TV network viewers, all right, my book, Like Father, Like Son, on Clouds of Glory, and Can You Believe Jesus Said This? Now, this book is normally $19.95 plus $4.95 shipping. This book is normally $2.95 plus, unfortunately, $4.95 shipping. But if you will go to my website, donkpreston.com, bibleprophecy.com, and you order these two books, all right? Order the two books, but send me a note that says, Don, I saw the offer on Now TV Network. I want to take advantage of your special. Now, here's what I'll do. I will refund the $4.95 shipping on this book. I will completely refund all of the money on this book. This is free, all right? Your total cost will be $19.95. Now, as I've stated, I can't make this offer to those of you who are outside of the continental U.S. Unfortunately, shipping is just prohibitive. But nonetheless, if you want a copy of these books, contact me. Send me an email through my website and tell me, look, I live in Canada, or I live in Puerto Rico, or I live wherever, okay, and can't afford the shipping. But if you'd like to purchase a PDF copy of these books with certain agreements attached, all right, but I can sell you a PDF copy at greatly reduced price. That way you have your own copy of these books to read at your own leisure. And I want to tell you, these books will absolutely blow you away. What are we doing? Well, we are continuing our discussion and our examination, our in-depth examination of Jesus' promise that he was going to come in the glory of the Father. That's why I wrote this book, Like Father, Like Son. A really, really quick refresher here. When Jesus said he was going to come in the glory of the Father, did you know that most scholarship agrees that Jesus was saying that he was going to come as the Father had come? I've shared with you over a period of months how the Father had come many times in the Old Testament. You know, we read about the day of the Lord's wrath, the day of the Lord's visitation, the day of the Lord coming out of heaven, walking on the tops of the mountains, heaven and earth being destroyed, the mountains of the earth melting under his feet, all in past tense, except a couple of passages that we're going to get to in the New Testament that uses that language. And so what I've shared with you is the fact that in the Old Testament, the Father had come many times. He had come on the clouds. He had come in flaming fire. He had come with the angels. He had come with a shout. He had come out of heaven, and he had destroyed, quote, heaven and earth many times. Now, I think you can see that it's real obvious that Yahweh had not destroyed the literal physical heaven and earth many times. I think you can see it's really obvious that Yahweh had never destroyed the sun, the moon, the stars, literally, physically. I think you can see that it's really obvious that Yahweh, the God of heaven, had never come out of heaven visibly, bodily, may I use the term, physically. It just hadn't happened. And yet we are told repeatedly through the prophets that when Yahweh sent his prophets to predict the judgment of this nation over here by means of this nation over here, that when the words of the prophet came true and this nation was judged, then men could know that he is God. And that is precisely what Jesus teaches us when, if you remember, all right, repetition, repetition, repetition. In John chapter 5, 21 and following, Jesus said, "From henceforth the Father judges no one, but has committed all judgment to the Son, that all men might worship the Son as they worship the Father. The Son can do nothing of himself, but what he sees the Father do." How had the Son seen the Father act in judgment? I just explained it. Okay? It was Jesus' teaching. Very clear. Now, believe you me, it's greatly overlooked or ignored by the great majority of modern Christianity and down through the centuries even, because the concept of a literal, visible, bodily, and even physical coming of Jesus as a 5'5" Jewish man coming on a literal cumulus cloud out of heaven at the so-called end of time is so ingrained, so embedded into our psyche, into our consciousness, into our intellectual understanding, that when we hear that Jesus was going to come like the Father had come, we're going, what? What does that mean? Even when we see how the Father had come many times, and it had never been literally, visibly, and bodily, we're still going, yeah, okay, yeah, but, he's got to come, right? I had someone on YouTube just the other day contact me. Now, I produce short, anywhere from 10 to 15-minute YouTube videos at least 4 days a week, sometimes 5. On Fridays, I very, very often review and respond and refute the books that are written attempting to refute what I'm saying. Okay? Right now, I've taken a little break from that because I've got some other responsibilities trying to get some books published and what have you. But the point of fact is, 4 days a week, I produce short YouTube videos. You could just go to YouTube and just look up Don K. Preston. Guess what the name of it is? Morning Musings. How creative is that, right? Okay, so you can go there and get the short version. But anyway, I had this individual contact me just this last week, and they said, you know, Brother Don, I agree with everything that you're saying. I can see that the Lord came in AD 70. I can see that was his coming on the clouds with the angels, with a shout and flaming fire. But what about the end of time? When does he come at the end of time? Well, let me say this as kindly as possible. If we can see that Jesus predicted that his coming with the angels on the clouds in the glory of the Father was to be in the first century, by the way, at the time of the fall of Jerusalem in AD 70. That was the nation that was to be judged. Okay? And it was the Romans that Jesus used as his instrument in his sovereignty with the prerogative of judgment that the Father had given him. It was Jesus who used the Romans to judge and to destroy Old Covenant Jerusalem. He came, pardon me, where did that come from? He came in the glory of the Father. See, I don't do a whole lot of fancy editing. This is me. This is real life. It's kind of like I've told you. You know, what you see here is, it's the real stuff. I don't have a fancy studio. I don't have switchers. I don't have a control panel. It's just you and me and the Bible. All right? So please excuse me for the sneeze, but guess what? I didn't want to start all over. All right? So it is what it is. Take me as I am. Thank you. All right. I've been sharing with you Matthew 16, 27 and 28, one of the passages where Jesus said, the Son of Man will come in the glory of the Father with his angels, and shall reward every man according to his works. And verily I say unto you, there are some standing here which shall not taste of death until they see the Son of Man coming in his kingdom. Now, I've got to tell you, these verses, along with several others in the New Testament, coming from the lips of Jesus, have been deeply troubling to Christianity throughout the entirety of Christian history. We are told by biblical scholars, that there was a crisis of faith in the early church immediately following the fall of Jerusalem in AD 70. That crisis, and by the way, one noted scholar, he's a world-famous scholar, Richard Bauckham is his name, and he says in one of his works that there was, in fact, a crisis of faith. That's what he calls it, on the part of the early church, because here they were, writing after AD 70, and they were going, what happened here? The Lord said he was going to come in that generation. Well, that generation has passed away, and he still didn't come. What's wrong? What happened? And so in books such as The Shepherd of Hermas, written not long after the fall of Jerusalem, here is the Shepherd of Hermas author going, we don't know why he didn't come. He should have come. He said he was coming, said when he was going to come, but he didn't. What do we do? How do we explain this? And so the Shepherd of Hermas came up with an explanation, his explanation, saying, well, here's the reason he didn't come. Because the church wasn't ready. Because the church wasn't righteous enough. Because the church wasn't holy enough. You know, the New Testament doesn't teach such a doctrine. It doesn't say, if the church is righteous enough, I will come. No, as a matter of fact, the New Testament teaches that there was supposed to be an apostasy of the church of such incredible magnitude that Jesus himself even posed the following question in Luke chapter 18, 6-8. When the Son of Man comes, will he even find faith on the earth? Do you catch the power of that rhetorical question? Here is Jesus speaking of his coming, and he said, when the Son of Man comes, will I even find faith? Now that pretty effectively falsifies the, quote, explanation, unquote, of the Shepherd of Hermas, who said, well, you know, the church wasn't holy enough. In Matthew chapter 24, 10-12, as Jesus predicted the events leading up to the fall of Jerusalem in AD 70, he said that there would be wars, rumors of wars, and because of the difficulties, the love of many would grow cold. He said there would be false teachers, false prophets, who would lead away many. And then he said, and because lawlessness will abound, the love of the many. Now, the New American Standard Bible Translation renders that as the love of the majority will grow cold. Wow. Do you catch that? So we have Jesus in Matthew chapter 24 openly stating that before the fall of Jerusalem in AD 70, there would be an apostasy of such massive proportions that Jesus said the love of the majority would grow cold. They would fall away. And then again, Luke chapter 18, in which he said, will he even find faith? So the point here being, when the Shepherd of Hermas tried to explain away the failure of Jesus' prediction of his coming, the failure of the apostles' prediction of his coming very soon, the explanation that was given goes against Scripture. Jesus well knew there was going to be an apostasy of the majority. He well knew that the church as a corporate whole was going to apostatize. That is not the reason he did not come. He said he was going to come when that apostasy was in place. The apostasy would not prevent his coming. So when we look at the early church's attempt to explain why Jesus did not come, their explanations do not work. And by the way, I have to tell you something. The Jews struggled with this as well. The non-Christian Jews. Here's something you need to know. And all of this is setting the stage for our understanding of Matthew 16, 27, and 28. All right? The Jews believed in the first century, and had believed for a good little while, that the 70 weeks of Daniel 9, 24 to 27, would be finished at the time of the fall of Jerusalem. The catastrophic, overwhelming destruction of Jerusalem. Now, I document this, by the way, in my book, The Resurrection of Daniel, chapter 12, verse 2, Fulfilled or Future. So if you want to go to the website, you can check that out and contact me about ordering that if you are out of the continental U.S. But the Jews had this understanding. Many, many ancient rabbis saw it, understood it. The 70 weeks were to consummate, finish, at an overwhelming destruction. And by the way, they realized that overwhelming destruction was to be in the first century. Well, you see, they also had this materialistic, nationalistic, physical expectation of the coming of Messiah in judgment, in the kingdom. You see, they had the same kind of materialistic, may I use the word, I don't mean any slander by this, carnal, physical, nationalistic concept of the nature of the coming of Messiah. When the Messiah came, he was going to come as the conquering warrior, and he was going to whip the Romans. That was the Jewish expectation of the kingdom and the resurrection. Okay? So here they are. They have a physical, carnal, materialistic expectation of the nature of the coming of the kingdom and resurrection, linked to the utter destruction of Jerusalem in fulfillment of Daniel 9. Well, guess what? Jerusalem was obviously destroyed in AD 70, utterly, totally wiped out. Not one stone left standing on top of another of the temple. In direct fulfillment of Matthew chapter 24. So, the rabbis, after the fall of Jerusalem, when their materialistic, carnal, physical, nationalistic concepts of the nature of the kingdom, which, by the way, Jesus had emphatically rejected when they offered it to him in John chapter 6, verse 15. When he perceived that they were about to come and make him king, he withdrew himself. So you see, Jesus rejected the carnalistic, materialistic, physical concept of the kingdom that the Jews had. He rejected that. So here we have, this is the Jewish expectation. Jesus rejected it. All right? But then the fall of Jerusalem came, which is the time that the Jews expected and understood in their understanding of Daniel chapter 9, 24 to 27. That was to be the time of the coming of the king. That was to be the time of the establishment of the kingdom, when the Messiah would whip the Romans. Well, it obviously didn't happen. The Romans whipped the Jews utterly. What was the Jewish reaction to that? Well, in the rabbinic literature, you find comments such as this. This is rough paraphrase, but you get the point. Woe is unto us, for all of the appointed times for the appearance of Messiah have come and gone, and he has not come. You know what they started doing? They started condemning from that point forward. From that point forward, they started condemning any calculations of the time for the appearing of Messiah. What they had calculated beforehand as supposed to happen with the AD 70 destruction of Jerusalem, but coupled with their materialistic, carnal, physical concepts of the kingdom, when their expectation was not met, they saw only failure. And by the way, I encounter people every single day on Facebook, YouTube, and in email. I encounter people every single day who have the identical, with slight nuances, materialistic, nationalistic, geopolitical, physical, and carnal expectation of the coming of the kingdom, the coming of Messiah. Only now, instead of the Jewish expectation of Messiah destroying the Romans, they have Messiah destroying Russia or China or even the U.S. Folks, that's so anachronistic as to be beyond consideration. It is absolutely not in the biblical text. We have to be willing to adjust our concepts of the nature of the kingdom and bring our concepts into conformity with what Jesus taught. My kingdom is not of this world. If my kingdom were of this world, my servants would fight. John 18:36 and following. We have to bring our concepts of the nature of the kingdom and thus of his coming into harmony with the fact that they came to offer Jesus, as a 5'5" Jewish man, a physical, earthly, geocentric, nationalistic, carnal kingdom, and he flat refused it. Oh, and by the way, I discuss all of this in this book, Like Father, Like Son, on Clouds of Glory. Hey, look, listen to me. If the Jews wanted a kingdom, and they did, and if Jesus came offering a kingdom, and he did, why is it then that when the Jews offered Jesus the kingdom, he rejected it? And why is it that from that point forward, the Jews rejected Jesus? Hey, look, do you try to kill somebody who is teaching what you believe in? Pretty obviously not. So Jesus rejected their concept of the kingdom. They then rejected his concept of the kingdom. Why? Because they had different concepts of the nature of the kingdom. Now catch this. The coming of the nature is of the same nature as the coming of the Son of Man. You see that in Matthew 16:28? Verily I say unto you, there are some standing here which shall not taste of death until they see the Son of Man coming in his kingdom. What's the nature of the kingdom? Let's see, the kingdom of God does not come with observation. Does not come with observation. Luke 17:20 and 21. Okay, if the kingdom does not come with observation, and the coming of the Lord is of the same nature as the kingdom, what does that mean? It means that the coming of the Lord does not come with observation. And somebody says, no, wait just a minute. Jesus said they're going to see him coming. That's right. Just like in the Old Testament, remember, when the Father came, he sent his prophets to say, Egypt will fall, Babylon will fall, Assyria will fall, Samaria will fall, Judah and Jerusalem will fall. And when the prophets proclaimed it throughout all of that world, and when those prophecies came to pass, Ezekiel said it 80 2 times. Then shall they know that I am God. Why? How? Because they would see the prophecies come to pass. They would not see the literal words, i.e., coming down out of heaven on literal clouds, with a literal shout, with literal fire, and the destruction of literal creation. No, they wouldn't see the literal fulfillment. But in the destruction of this nation, in fulfillment of God's promise to destroy that nation by means of this nation, then they would know that He is God. So once again, folks, we have to bring our concepts into harmony with the nature of the kingdom as described by Jesus and by the New Testament. When Paul was talking about resurrection, he said, we do not look at the things that are seen, but on the things that are unseen. What's he talking about? Though our outward man perish, yet our inward man is being renewed day by day. Do you see the inner man being renewed day by day? No. No, it's spiritual reality. Spiritual reality. And so Paul could say, we do not walk by sight, but by faith. This pretty well describes it, if we are able and willing to accept it. So, once again, it is time for us to bring our concepts of the nature of the coming of the Lord in His kingdom into conformity with what Jesus had to say about when He was coming in His kingdom. What did Jesus say about His coming in the glory of the Father, with His angels, in judgment, in the kingdom? What did Jesus say about that? His words are emphatic. Verily, I say unto you, there's some standing here which shall not taste of death until they see the Son of Man coming in His kingdom. And folks, that happened in the first century, and I'm going to prove that to you in the weeks to come. I'll see you next week.